Could you please tell us what you know about the lives of individual Jews that your family saved, including the story of the Jewish doctor from Shkup, Chaim Abravanel, who saved your life? Since 1939, my father cooperated with Jewish business people and tradesmen. In 1940, some 3 families, Jewish families, offered my father some money so that he could build a guest house for them right by our own house when the war was starting around Yugoslavia. And so we were also expecting the war to come here as well. So some 4 families came to our house to live with us during the war for several months. The case of Dr. Chaim Abravanel is more specific than the other Jewish families that lived with us in Dechan. My father offered to these people to be a partner, Comforti, Natani, Koheni. These are the Jewish businessmen that my father was a partner with in businesses. How it happened that Dr. Abravanel saved my life relates to the fact that in 1940, Dr. Abravanel was recruited as a medic, as a doctor in the army with the military unit in Jakova. Gvozdeni Puk was the name of that military unit in Jakova. The name in English means the iron unit. So the idea was for this unit to be going to Croatia. However, one of these Jews that was in Dechan, Solomon Comfort, was outside of my father's store, and he saw the bus and Dr. Abravanel in the bus passing by. So at that time, just about a month ago, my aunt and my uncle and my other aunt had died out of tifo. So me, being a kid, was very sad that these people died. So I also was infected with a typhus virus. And when Solomon saw Dr. Abravanel, seeing him in the bus going to Jakova, he calls him up and calls my father up and tells my father that Dr. Abravanel went to Jakova. So he tells my father, let's go find him. He is a doctor specializing in infectious diseases, so he could help your son. So my father goes with him to see Dr. Abravanel at the bus station in Jakova. They meet him there, and Solomon requests that Dr. Abravanel comes to Dechan to visit me. So he says, at the moment, no, I cannot. I have to report to the military unit that day, but I can come in about 2 days. Or otherwise you have to bring the child here so I can treat him here, he said. So that's what we did. 2 days later, we went to my uncle's house, Isset Stavilets's house, and I was still sick. My older sister Sania was also sick of the same disease. So Dr. Abravanel came to visit both of us at my uncle's house in Jakova, so they preferred we shouldn't be eating everything. He recommended a strict diet for us, and he asked that we be careful that we don't infect other people in the family. So we had to be somehow isolated from the rest of the family. So me and my sister, my older sister Sania, got sick while she was treating me and taking care of me. She was the one to bring me water, to bring me food, to help me comfort, go to bed, and so forth and so on. So Dr. Abravanel suspected the virus was typhus. So even though he was not sure, he came together with a soldier. He got some blood sample from me and requested that my blood tests are run in Shkup. Who could go to do the tests for me? So my Uncle Ismet Stavileci from Jakova went to Shkup to send my blood sample for analysis there at the General Hospital in Shkup. That day the hospital was bombed by the Nazis, so he couldn't get any results. So he came back from Shkup. So then from Kaçanik, Elazhan, he comes to Ferizay with another horse carriage and then finally takes a bus to Jakova, but having no results with him. However, Dr. Abravanel, before my uncle actually came back from Shkup, he took medical measures he thought were necessary as to how I should get better soon. Me and my sister as well, because she was sick, as I said before, and so my mother was looking after both of us at that time. So thank God we both got better, and in the meantime, that unit that Dr. Abravanel belonged to was transferred to another place from Jakova. So whatever the politicians had made those decisions, I don't know, but the unit had to go to some place in Vojvodina or Serbia. So passing by Deccan again, they saw the doctor in that with that unit, and they were going through the channel on the way to Peja to get on a train to go to Vojvodina. So then my father and his friends offered the doctor to leave the unit and come to our house. He was afraid to do so, and then again the two Jews living with our family go with my father to ask the commander, and then my father goes to ask the unit commander to ask to release the doctor. Well, the commander says no, and so my father with his friends make it happen so that they get the doctor. They pretty much kidnap the doctor from the unit, take him into our house. They give him Albanian traditional clothes so that he could not be noticed that he was a foreigner. And so my father takes him to our cousins in Iznich, in the village of Iznich, till the unit was gone. And when the unit was gone, then my father brought back the doctor into our house, where he lived for at least about 2 months. The doctor lived. We had a house built in our yard for the Jewish families, but that house was already packed with people, so that my father gave him a room in our own house, in the house where we lived, and the window from his room looked overlooked the street outside our house. So when the doctor was taken from the unit from my father and his friends, he asked that another friend of his that was Jew be taken out of the unit. And so my father also did it. They got his friend out of the unit, and after his Jew friend stayed with us for a couple of days, he left the house and went to Jakova on some other military tracks that were going back to Jakova, and my father had given him some new shirts for men, so that he would not be seen that he was a soldier, and so that he could go on and move on. And so he used all these men's shirts he had bought to give to the Jews that we were getting into our own house. And so, this other friend of the doctor went back finally. We heard that he went back to Subotica. So there was a truck that was going to Belgrade that stopped by our store to buy stuff. My father asked them kindly, by giving them free stuff, to take this doctor's friend with on the truck so that he could go to Subotica or Belgrade, wherever the truck was going. So once he left, we never heard from that person, so we really have no news. We really got no news ever from that doctor's friends. So Dr. Abravanel and the other Jews in our family lived in the Chan for at least 4 months. The doctor could not stay doing nothing. The people found out soon that he was a doctor, so a lot of the villagers would come to our house to see the doctor. Some wanted to pay him, but he never wanted to take a dime out of anyone. He said, I'm a guest here at Arslan Reznigi's house, and I do not need to get paid for my services. I am already being fed and well hosted by Arslan Reznigi. So for the time that he lived in our house, he never took money from anyone. But at the same time, he suggested he helped a lot of people with diagnosis and treatment of the typhus virus and other medical problems that the villagers had. Some of the patients, he suggested that they drink some special particular water that was coming out at the spring by the church. So, he, besides the medical treatments, he also gave suggestions on popular medicine treatments for a lot of the villagers that needed his help and support. So some people would, except for money, they'd drink eggs and other things, but the doctor never received anything back from the patients he saw. And then after 4.5 months living with us, he wanted to be sent to Shkup. At that time Kosovo was with Albania under the Italians at that time and the Nazis, and then Macedonia was under the Slav control. So my father decided to make the wish of Dr. Abravanel happen by taking him to Shkup. So my father took 2 of his employees with the horse carriage and that were living in Dechan. So to go to Shkup, they had to go through Dechan, Jakov, Prizren, Shtrps, and then from Shtrps to Brezovic, to Tetov, and then from Tetov to go to Shkup. So they had to stay one night in Prizren and another night in Tetov, and the third night they finally got to Shkup. My father, the doctor, and 2 of my father's employees. When they got to Shkup at the doctor's house, my father knocks on the door, and from behind the door, the wife of the doctor asks, "Who is it?" And my father says, "I'm Arslan Reznigi. I would like to talk to Dr. Abravanel," even though Dr. Abravanel was with my father outside the door. She starts yelling and screaming, saying, "Dr. Abravanel is no longer alive. The military took him. He's disappeared. He's most likely been killed." So she was very sad, and so, the reason why my father asked the question was to kind of prepare her not to be surprised when she'd see Dr. Abravanel. So as she was screaming about the fact that she thought he was dead, Dr. Abravanel Dr. Abir says something in their language that she understands, and then she was very happy and starts yelling Abravanel, Abravanel, and that finally they open the door and then they see one another. And my father and the two employees wanted to go to a local motel to spend the night with the carriage and the horses and his two employees. So he spent 2 nights there, and then after 2 nights he came back to Dichan and left the doctor in his house there. The doctor was a very knowledgeable doctor, and so the authorities of that time asked him to go to Manastir, so that he would perform the duties of a main doctor of the Manastir hospital. And when we heard that he went to Manastir, my father and one of his employees took the horse carriage and went to Manastir to see the doctor and see how he was doing there. And the doctor was welcomed them very well in Manastir. So my father used to tell the story that even 2 months later, my father also went again to visit the doctor, because my father was very much thankful to the doctor for saving my life and my sister's lives, because a few people got saved that were infected with typhus at that time. So my father, when he goes for the second time to Manastir, my father would tell me that there was an imam in Manastir that was a psychic, and so a lot of things he kind of would have predicted that would happen in the future. So a lot of people would go to this imam to read their upcoming fate. So this imam would always keep the door locked so that not a whole lot of people would come in. So my father knocks on the door, and he and the doctor go into the house of this imam. So when the imam sees this doctor, he calls him up and says, "Come on, with whoever you are together." And so they both come in this imam's house, and they talk, the three of them, and the doctor tells him the story of how my father saved him, and then my father tells him the story of how the doctor saved me and my sister. So they have coffee, and they spend some time together, and then they go to Manastir, a doctor's house, where they spend the night. And even after that, my father went to visit the doctor twice with my mother, and once I even was with them. And this was a time when the train was actually working from Shkup to Manastir, until he finally decided to be there, because he was left alone with his niece, Rachel. He sometimes wanted to take his niece to his uncle to live there. A lot of his close relatives were dead, so he wanted to take Rachel to his uncle. How come his other relatives died? Oh, I forgot to mention it. The earthquake that hit Shkup killed the rest of his family, and only the doctor's niece survived. So he wanted her to be educated in Hebrew and in the Jewish community, which is why he wanted his niece to be sent to his uncle. So even since then, our families got very, very connected to Dr. Abravanel. So we would go and visit him, and sometimes he'd come to Dichan and visit us. My father and mother usually went to visit him very often. I know I was there twice. I remember one time I was leading an athletic team in Athens, and coming back from Athens to Belgrade on a plane, there was a lady coming onto that plane, and so it so happened that we are sitting on the same row with the lady, young lady. So I asked her where she was from, and she says, I'm from Belgrade, I was in Israel. And I asked her, would it happen for you to know some of the people we knew? And she said, no, I don't. But I've heard that a child that was a Jewish child from Shkup that was sent to Israel was finishing high school, and she told me that she had met one of her friends, and so she told me that she wanted to become a doctor. And for a long time after that, we had lost touch. We had no address for the doctor, for the doctor's niece, because the doctor passed away and his wife passed away. They both had gone to Israel and had died while they were there. For the time that they were here, the doctor would usually write to us, at least, if he could not come to visit. But when my father and mother went to visit him in Manastir, he took him one time to Ohar for sightseeing at the lake Ohar. So at that time, my father knew how to swim, but my mother couldn't, and it was a good experience for them to be on a boat around the Ohar lake. So, we were very, very close friends with this doctor, because he saved me and my sister from the typhus virus. And as I said, while he was in Macedonia, he would write to us very often, and we would always respond to his letters. And my father and mother, as I said, would go very often to visit him. They would usually write in Serbian, so that both of them would understand what one and the other were saying. So my father was not very well in handwriting, but still he could write something that the doctor would understand. So the good thing is they could understand. And then finally, when we got phones, they started talking on the phone. And then, as I said, finally, he left for Israel. And he had told us before he left that he was going to go there. And so my father, mother, and I, and my wife, had gone to see him before he left for Israel. So we met them in Shkup because they were going to leave from Shkup. We had gone to Sami Mizraki, his house where we met the Bravanels before they left for Israel. Later on, we started. We became in touch. We came in touch with his niece, who was in Israel. So we started staying in touch with her, and we have kept in touch ever since. She was the one who also requested she requested pictures that we had of her grandfather, Dr. Bravanel, and other information about him. So this is how Yad Vashem, and based on the pictures that we had, my father and I and my mother and my wife and the doctor and his family, my father was then decorated with the Yad Vashem award for the righteous among the people. Except for Solomon Conforti, who had gone to Tirana and then to Athens in the year 1960. He had come back here in Pristina. He found where we were living at that time. I was building my house at the Meto Bayraktari school. My father and my mother were living here, He wanted to meet them and he wanted to see me as well, because through Sami Mizraki of Shkup, he had found out that we were now living in Pristina, and Sami then was director of Jugopetrol Transportation Division of Shkup, Macedonia, and I was at that time director of Jugopetrol for Kosovo. So Sami, of course, knew where we were living, so he gave the directions to Solomon Conforti that came here. We were very happy to see him here, and when he saw that I was building a new house, he had offered my father to pay for the rest of the cost of building of my house. He thought I didn't have enough money to build my house, and so my father said, no, we're not gonna get any money from you. We will build the house on our own. We don't want you to feel that you have to pay us, because we're friends and what we have done is for you. He wanted to meet Beqir Kastrati, who was a French professor. Beqir was from Peja. My father had organized a schedule for Beqir to come and teach the daughter of Solomon and the daughter of Raphael, Ivetan and Suzika, to teach in French. So Beqir had to come here, had to come to Deccan every day. So finally my father got him a job in Deccan as a teacher, so that he wouldn't have to travel between Peja and Deccan every day. So he was then a teacher, and then later on became a principal of the elementary school there, and he would come every day to our house to teach the daughters of Solomon. During the time that the doctor stayed in Deccan, he lived in our house where my own family, where our family lived. So this is the main entrance to the house. The doctor lived in this room right here. This second floor had 4 rooms, and the doctor lived in this third room here, and I lived in the middle room, and then we had the hallway and the stairs for the first floor, to the first floor. So this was our living house. This was our house where we lived in Deccan. So that house is also in this other picture. This is in late 1970s, the Serbs had turned down this house. As you see, we only see here the walls. The Serbs destroyed the house because they thought this house was where the Jews lived. But this other house was built by my father for the guests, for the Jewish people we would keep in. So we had the Nathan and Conforti family living up here in the second floor. There was also an annex to this building, which was took down by the time we took the pictures, where other people like Levi lived. So right here, it's my mother and I, and as you can see, this is the house where the Jews lived. Most of the Jews lived in this guest house, and this was the garden that we had right by our house. So if there was any danger for the Jews in that house, they could easily, through the first floor, come into the garden, and through the garden move to the nearby village of Reznigi, to our cousins there. And they would stay here a night or two and come back when the danger was no longer in our neighborhood. So they would then come back in the house and at us. So when Dr. Abravanel and the other doctor that my father had saved from the military unit, their military clothes were buried in this garden here, and my father had given them civilian and Albanian national clothes so they could move freely around and about.
Cilët anëtar të familjes, përveç babës, kanë ndihmuar shpëtimin e hebrejve?
Which family members, besides your father, helped rescue Jews? Where did they hide Jews seeking shelter? And how and where did they eventually transfer them to safety outside Kosovo? Well, as to where they were transferred to, it depended where they wanted to be transferred. Some of them who had a better financial standing, my father would order cars for them to come and pick them up. And so, with the family of Mr. Spahir, who was a businessman and a partner of my father, would arrange for these cars to come to our place and pick up 3 or 4 people that wanted to go directly to Tirana in Albania. So practically a lot of families my father transferred into Albania through Prizren on cars of Mr. Spahia and his brothers. And then in Albania he would give him shelter, and he would give him food, and he would also, for some of them that wanted to or they needed to, he gave him jobs. He gave him jobs into different articraft stores, so they could make a living. But to get them into Albania, they had to had ID cards, Kosovar ID cards of that time, issued by the municipality of Deçan. And these ID cards would kind of make them Bosnians. We would put them Bosnian names because they spoke Serbian. We couldn't put them Albanian names because they didn't know Albanian. So we gave them ID cards as Bosnians from Deçan that would go through Deçan, that would go through Prizren into Albania. But there were some who could not afford to pay for their transport, for a car to pick them up and put them to Albania, and my father would arrange for other means of transportation for these people free of charge so that they could be taken into Albania. But even for them and for everyone that had to go from Deçan into Albania, my father got him ID cards. He was good friends with Arif Aliçkaj, a secretary for the municipality of Deçan. At that time I was young and I don't remember correctly, but probably my father probably paid some money for the authorities to give these Jews Kosovar ID cards so that they could go into Albania. So one of the sons of this secretary, a few months, just a couple of months ago, called to talk to me about the fact that he wanted me to know, he wanted to see whether I knew that his father, the secretary of the municipality at that time, was also working with my father. I was happy to confirm that. So yes, my father always tried to find out ways to help these guys. As I said, they would give them national Albanian clothes. They would get rid of their military clothes, like in the case of the doctor that was taken out of the military unit and put in the civilian clothes so that he could survive. So my father did not spare anything to help these people. Very seldom, except for Solomon Conforti and Israel, who went to Rome, that were in touch with us. The rest of the Jews that went through our house did not write back to us, and I guess the reason for that was that they thought by writing to us I would put my father in danger with the local authorities at that time. So anyways, but as I said, my father first started working with Jews as a business partner, and since 1931, because at that time he was exporting corn and he was exporting beans, loads of beans and loads of corn. He owned a truck later on, and then he had Rasim Dula and Halim Smolica and Ibrahim Dula, Darahim Vreja, that would work for my father as truck drivers to export and transport corn and beans. And then later on Ali Tula was also, and Shani Tula, that worked with trucks for my father. So what's this car all about? So in 1932, when my father was in Thessaloniki, Greece, at that time he had gone there to talk to a business partner of his about the prices of beans and corn. My father was going to go there with Milan Vucic, and they had a surprise in Thessaloniki in Greece. So here is Ljubomir Vucic, the son of Milan, a driver and a representative of the joint venture of Reznigi and Vucic, an enterprise that was exporting corn and beans to Thessaloniki. So this picture was taken as a greeting card for my cousin that my father sent this card to wish him happy birthday, to Rasim. Rasim was my cousin, and my father was writing to him to wish him happy birthday. This was in 1932. So the other writing that you see in Albanian is when I wrote to translate the words, because the words were written in Serbian, Serbo-Croatian at that time. So let me see this one more. So he also says, she says, we are here in this picture with Luba, the son of Vucic. During the time that my father was very well involved in trade, you know that my father was decorated by King Alexander for being a skillful and reputable trader. And this is a copy of the diploma that was given to him by the king. And this was by the king of Yugoslavia that honored my father for being a skillful and successful businessman, a trader, for exporting products abroad. And so there was also a pin that came along with this diploma that we still have. We have the original and we have the pin. And a year after he received this award, the Monopole building that I mentioned before was put up in flames, and then he ended up in jail. What was your reaction to your family's rescue of Jews, and did you play a role in it? You personally. To be honest, I did not play a personal role or a special role in that. I was young at that time. I did not understand what was really happening. To be honest, not just me, but most of the people my age at that time did not understand what was happening. At that time I was 15, 16 years old. I really could not think about politics. I just know one thing, that I wanted to go and visit Albania, Tirana. And I remember one time I got in one of the cars that was transporting Jews that were being transferred to Albania. So I got into that car with them, and my father didn't want to let me go. My father didn't know when I got in the car. So when we go to Jakova, my father had informed the chief of police in Jakova, and he said that there's a car and that my son is in the car and I want my son out of their car. And so he tells the chief of police to get me out of the car. So the chief of police stopped the car in Jakova, in the downtown of Jakova, and he asked the driver, "Who are you and where are you going to?" And so he saw me in the car. He knew me, and he remembered me. He had seen me before with my father. And so he asked me, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Tirana. He said, why would you want to go there? He says, I want to go with them. These are our guests. He said, well, get out of the car. So why would I need to go get out of the car? She said, get out in the car before I make you get out of the car. And so, I didn't say anything else. I just got out of the car. I got out of the car. I was left in Jakova. Then he took me to the bus station, put me on the bus for Dechon. And later on, then I had understood that my father was the one who had called the police officer to get me out of the car. So I couldn't go to Tirana. So at that time, I really couldn't value and appreciate the fact and the support that my father was giving to the Jews. I thought these were guests, and my father was respecting them, and so I had to respect them and help them as well. Was your family ever in danger? If so, can you describe particular incidents? No, I don't think there were any major incidents at that time. Not that I remember, at least. But I remember that there was a person from Jakova, the same age of my father. They would come very often to my father, and people would say that this guy was a spy of the Nazis. His name was Hassan. I forgot his last name. Can't recall his last name. So he'd come very often to talk to my father, and he would sometimes he was a poor person, to be honest, and maybe, or he just pretended to be poor because he was a spy, and then he sometimes would come in for lunch, or sometimes he'd stay for dinner, and then my father would see him off. But there was no major incidents in our family for the sake of our guests and the Jews that lived with us. But this was the person that would come very often. And my father had told the Jews as well, and he had also asked me and the mother and the rest of our family not to talk to this person, not to be, because he is after information. And we're just my father and this person went to school together, so he had pretended he was very good friends to my father, but my father and And the rest of our family never gave him any information that he was probably after. So, but no, we never had any major incidents. But I remember a couple of cases where the military would come in and my father would put all the Jews through the garden into the village of Reznigi, where they would spend a couple of nights before they'd come back to our house also again. And this would happen when, you know, the Nazis would come in and kill other people, including Jews, in the Chan and the neighborhood. But so when we saw there was danger, we always asked them to go to Reznigi at our cousins for a couple of nights until the situation would calm down again. Except for staying with our cousins in Reznigi, there was also the chairman of the village, Ali Haji, who was a very good friend of my father, a very good man, and a very great Albanian. And remember that there were a lot of Montenegrins that would come into this area and would take the Albanian lands, but this person always figured out the best ways between the Albanian and Montenegrin so no conflicts would occur. So he was a very good man, and he was also one of the people that helped us with accommodating the Jews when we needed them to go to Reznigi. So this person was very helpful, so the fact is that, except for sleeping at our cousins, the Jews would also stay at this person. So, to be honest, I did not know at that time what was really happening. I did not know anything about politics or war. I worked the entire time in my father's store. Could you tell us the names of other Kosovo Albanians who saved Jews? What roles did they play, and how did your family interact with them? Saving Jews in other houses was because of my father. There's been cases when my father would take a Jewish family to Ujmir, pretending that they were traders, to spend some time. They would stay in the house of Sul. I can't recall his last name. Probably called Suldushi is the person in Ujmir, where my father would take these Jewish families and pretend they were traders. Like, you know, they would be looking for, they would be pretending that they were buying fruits from my father as a trader. And so my father would put them up there, and then from that place they'd take them to another place, always presenting them as traders. But thankfully, no one was put in danger of their lives for my father doing this. So, but most of the time, my father would keep the Jews in our own house. I remember one time he had gotten someone from Glogovts, from Drenica region, and then when he heard the army was coming in, he would take some of the Jews in the village of Prokop to some other Albanian family for a couple or 3 days. And then from there he would take him into Albania. As I mentioned before, Arif Alichkaj was one of the other people, one of the other persons that helped my father in saving Jews by allowing them access into Albania. and other people that worked with my father to take these Jews to Voksh and Beshkarochkodolit and other places into Albania. So I don't know what else to say, but I know for a fact that my father's authority as a big businessman and his reputation in the community was important in protecting the Jews, because not anybody could spy on my father. So we were safe enough. Of course, it was war. No one was perfectly safe, but we were better off. But also the Jews that we had in our house were always very careful. Remember the Becher Castrati story I told you about? He would pay the bus every day to come to Dichan to teach the two Jewish girls in French. So my father helped him to come to the Dichan school, so he would be there and would not have to travel. So this was one way that we avoided danger, so we wouldn't have this guy traveling every day so that he would be noticed by the Nazis. And so when he was in Dichan, he would come to teach Iveta and the other daughter of Raphael to teach them French. And so when I said before, when Solomon had come back to Pristina, he wanted also to meet the teacher, Becher. And we had called Becher up for lunch, and he met with Solomon, and now Becher has passed away. But they met again after the war, Solomon and Becher, who taught his daughter French. Were there other families that saved Jews in Kosovo? Yes, there were many other Albanian families that saved Jews. For example, the Spahia family, the Dzurza family, then the Tenuza family in Jakova, Zai Danuza, then Gerlesh family and the Husnileshi family and his brother, whose name I can't recall right now. But so there were other families in Jakova and around Kosovo that saved Jews or helped Jews cross into Albania. So Jews felt very secure coming into Albanian households. Albanians were well known for their besa, for their trust. So everyone that would come into an Albanian household, they'd ask for the besa. And so even the Jews, when they come in, they'd ask for the besa. And so when the Albanians said yes, they were secure. They felt safe and secure, and the Albanian families, because they had gotten the besa. The Albanians had the besa. The besa was the trust. So whoever gave the besa to these Jews or other guests in the family, they would sacrifice the entire family, but they would not let anything bad happening to their guest. The Jews that were in the Dichan region and those who lived with us for months were somewhat free. There's pictures of my father taking them into Dichan mountainous areas, and then my father would connect them with other Jews that were living in the area. So my father took good care of these people. He always did all he could, and I guess he was able to do what he did because of his business relationships with the Jews and his successful businesses. He had a good vision, and he was a person that wanted to help others. And all those who went through my father's caring and our house, they all were safe and sound in the end. No one suffered anything ever. So the Jews that were being sheltered in other families, were these Jews connected to the Jews in our family? Well, you know, the Jews are always well connected with one another. They always would find one another. They would come to my father in Dechan, and my father would take him to a certain house, a certain household. He would ask the head of the household whether they would want to keep these Jews in for a while till my father would arrange transportation and safe passage for them into Albania. My father would give these host families always enough food for the Jews, so my father would always make sure that the Jews that wanted to go into Albania could go to Albania, and then you would have the other Jews that would come to the Jews that we had in our own family, and they would sleep over there for a couple of nights or so and wait till the transportation had been arranged so that they could go into Albania. So really my father was more involved in saving the Jews than in his own business. This was a time that he dedicated himself to doing this, so that the entire village knew about this. And they supported my father. They were not spies. My father was very well respected among all villagers. And as I've said before, in 1938, to make Dechan a town, a municipality of its own, my father took Saljavuza, and then a Montenegrin, well-known person from the Stavlica, I don't remember whether his last name was Popovic or Ivanovic, I'm not sure, but I know that my father took these two people and got on a bus and went to Cetinje, where they requested that Dechan become a city, become a municipality, because when my father would transport beans, you know, at that time there was no trucks, he would have to load 30 all the way to 50 horse carriages and take them all into the train station in Peja. And the Peja local authorities were upset because they would have a mess at the train station with all these horse carriages. So my father decided to go to Cetinje and request that Dechan become a municipality, so that Dechan would have more local authority, because at the time actually Dechan was under the local authority of Jakov. So the chief of that department at that time promised that they would do it, but you know, Dechan only became a municipality of its own after the war. Did your family have contacts with organizations or individuals in Albania that received the Jews that your family saved? If so, can you tell us about this? Well, throughout my answers, I've probably mentioned the fact that it was mainly the Spahia brothers in Albania that my family dealt with, and through them, all the Jews that lived to us and that stayed in our house in Dechan were taken into Albania through the Spahia brothers. They would arrange, my father and they would arrange for cars from Prizren. There was no other cars, private cars at the time, there were only business cars. And the Spahia brothers had cars that belonged to their business, so my father would hire these cars, bring these cars to Dechan. They would always ask for a more secure car that would take these Jews into Albania. And actually, I just 4 years ago, I was very amazed when I found out from a partner of Halim Spahia, who was that driver that came to our house to pick up the Jews, and he spoke Albanian, he spoke Serbo-Croatian, and he spoke German. This was amazing. So Hasan Rajmat Zurza, a partner of the Spahia brothers, tells me he was a German. I'm like, How come this was a German? How could they trust a German to come and pick up Jews and take them into Albania? Well, the reason was he spoke German. He could always get better and safer passage through German checkpoints because he spoke German. And as I said before, our father would give to these Jews ID cards and present them as Bosnians of Kosovo. Was your family aware of what was happening to Jews in Serbia and other parts of the Balkans? If so, could you describe what you knew? And when did your family become aware of the Nazi death camps? To be honest, our family was not very well aware of these things. I was among the people who knew more about these things and was better educated. But the fact remains